Until a stranger asked for refuge from the cold, she spent another Christmas alone by the fire. Clara sat quietly by the fire, her fingers wrapped around a warm mug of tea. The small flames danced in the fireplace, casting soft golden light across the room. Outside, snow fell gently, blanketing the streets in white, making everything look calm and peaceful. Yet, inside her apartment, Clara felt an emptiness that the warmth of the fire could not chase away. It was Christmas Eve, a time usually full of laughter, family, and joy, but for Clara, it had become a reminder of all the years she had spent alone. Her apartment was modest but cozy. A small Christmas tree sat in the corner, decorated with a few colorful lights and ornaments that she had collected over the years. Some were handmade, others were gifts from friends she barely saw anymore. She had hung a string of lights along the windowsill, and tiny paper stars adorned the walls. Clara had always loved Christmas, the way it felt magical, like the world had paused for a moment to celebrate kindness, hope, and love. But now, surrounded by decorations and memories, the magic seemed distant, almost unreachable. Clara thought back to previous Christmases. There were times when the house was full of laughter, when children ran around with wide eyes at the sight of presents, and when family gatherings seemed endless. She remembered the smell of baked cookies, the sound of carols playing softly in the background, and the feeling of warmth not just from the fire but from being surrounded by people who cared. Those memories were bittersweet now. They reminded her that she had once experienced such joy, but they also highlighted the loneliness that had crept into her life over the years. She had tried to keep busy, to distract herself from the empty feeling. In the mornings, she would go for walks, watching the snow fall and feeling the crisp air on her face. She would stop by the small market on the corner to buy ingredients for a simple meal. She loved cooking, even if it was just for herself, because the process brought her comfort. She would hum softly as she chopped vegetables or stirred a pot on the stove, letting the familiar rhythm fill the silence of her home. But as evening approached and the streets emptied, the quiet returned, and with it the sense of being completely alone. Tonight, like many Christmas Eves before, Clara had prepared a small dinner for herself. She had cooked a simple roast chicken, roasted vegetables, and a small dessert, a slice of homemade cake she had baked earlier in the day. She had placed everything neatly on a tray and carried it to her small dining table by the window. The snow outside reflected the twinkling lights of the tree, making the night feel serene. She had set a place for herself, her favorite plate and cup, and had lit a candle to add warmth to the evening. Everything was perfect, yet she felt a strange emptiness, as if the joy of the holiday had passed her by. Clara sipped her tea and looked around the room. She thought about how life had changed over the years. Friends had moved away, some had started families of their own, and others simply drifted out of touch. Her family lived far away, and traveling to see them was difficult, especially during the busy holiday season. She had always been independent, proud of her ability to take care of herself, but tonight the pride felt heavy. Independence was comforting most of the time, but at Christmas it felt like a quiet cage, one that reminded her that she had no one to share the moment with. As the evening wore on, Clara tried to keep her mind occupied. She turned on soft Christmas music and hummed along, hoping the familiar tunes would bring some cheer. She rearranged the ornaments on the tree, adjusted the lights, and even polished a few of the shiny baubles. Each small task brought a fleeting sense of satisfaction, but it was soon replaced by the stillness of the room. The clock ticked quietly, each second echoing the solitude she felt. She ate her dinner slowly, savoring each bite, imagining the laughter and conversation that might have filled the room if she were not alone. Despite the loneliness, Clara tried to hold on to hope. She reminded herself that being alone did not mean she was unloved. She had people who cared about her, even if they were far away. There were neighbors she exchanged greetings with, co-workers she occasionally spoke to, and old friends who still sent messages during the holidays. It was not the same as being surrounded by a warm gathering, but it was something. She clung to these small connections, letting them remind her that she was not completely forgotten in the world. Clara's thoughts wandered as she gazed at the flickering fire. She remembered the gifts she had received as a child, the ones that brought tears of joy to her eyes, the ones that made her feel special and loved. She thought about the holiday traditions her family had, like decorating the tree together, singing carols, and preparing a big feast. Those memories were like a gentle ache in her heart, a mixture of happiness and longing. She knew that the past could not return, but she cherished the memories anyway, letting them remind her of the warmth and love she had once experienced. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a moment, letting the quiet settle around her. The soft crackle of the fire was comforting, and the gentle hum of the wind outside created a peaceful rhythm. She felt a strange mix of sadness and calmness, a feeling that had become familiar over the years. Clara knew that this was her reality, at least for now. She had learned to find solace in the little things. The warmth of the fire, the taste of a well-cooked meal, the glow of the Christmas lights, and the memories of happier times. These small joys were enough to carry her through the evening, even if the deeper longing for companionship remained. As she sipped the last of her tea, Clara allowed herself a small smile. She had made it through another year, and despite the loneliness, she had created a space of comfort and warmth for herself. She had not given up on life, or on hope, even if the holiday season made the emptiness more noticeable. She reminded herself that there could still be surprises, that kindness could appear in unexpected ways, and that connections could be made even in the most unlikely moments. For now, she would sit by the fire, embrace the quiet, and let the night unfold gently around her. Clara took one last look around her apartment, her eyes lingering on the tree, the lights, and the fire. She whispered a small wish to herself, a hope that one day she would not have to spend Christmas alone. She promised herself that she would remain open to the possibilities, no matter how small they seemed. With that thought, she leaned back in her chair, wrapped her blanket tighter around her shoulders, and allowed herself to be fully present in the moment. The snow continued to fall outside, covering the world in white, and for the first time that evening, Clara felt a quiet sense of peace. The gentle crackle of the fire had begun to lull Clara into a quiet rhythm, the soft glow casting long, warm shadows across her living room. She had just finished her tea and was settling back into her chair when an unexpected sound broke the calm. A knock at the door. It was soft, almost tentative, but in the quiet of the evening, it felt startling. Clara's heart jumped, and for a moment she froze. Visitors at this hour were unusual. She rarely received anyone during the holidays, and certainly not on Christmas Eve. Curiosity and caution warred within her. She had spent years protecting her little world, creating routines that kept her safe, warm, and comfortable, but something in the sound, a nervous, almost pleading quality, made her put down her cup and approach the door. She peeked through the frosted glass, squinting to see who could be standing there in the cold night. A young man, bundled in a worn coat, stood shivering on the doorstep. His hair was damp with snow, and his hands were stuffed into the pockets of his jacket, trembling despite his efforts to keep warm. A small backpack hung from his shoulders, and his face, pale from the cold, looked both hopeful and uncertain. Clara's first instinct was to hesitate, to remind herself to be careful. She did not know this person, and strangers could sometimes bring trouble. But as their eyes met through the glass, she saw something that made her pause, a genuine vulnerability, a silent plea for help that went beyond words. He spoke softly. "Excuse me, I know it's late, but could I stay inside for a little while? It's freezing out here." His voice was calm but edged with desperation, the kind that comes from being alone and exhausted in harsh weather. Clara's heart softened, and the hesitation in her mind began to dissolve. It was just a cold night, she reminded herself. She had room, warmth, and food. What harm could it do to offer a stranger shelter for a short while? With a small nod, she opened the door wider and stepped aside. "Come in." "Quickly, before you catch cold," she said, keeping her voice steady even though a small flutter of nervousness ran through her. The young man thanked her quietly, stepping into the warmth of the apartment. The contrast between the icy street and her cozy living room was immediate. He let out a small sigh of relief as heat brushed against his face, and Clara noticed the way he shivered even as he tried to stand tall. "Here, sit," she said, pointing to a chair near the fire. She grabbed a soft, thick blanket from the back of the couch and draped it over his shoulders. The young man looked at her with wide, grateful eyes, and she felt a strange warmth in her chest, a mix of compassion and surprise at the effect such a small gesture could have. It was a feeling she had not experienced in years, not since she had last hosted friends or family during the holidays. As he settled into the chair, Clara noticed the careful way he avoided making himself too comfortable, as if he was not used to kindness. She poured him a cup of tea, the steam rising gently between them. "Drink this slowly." "It will warm you up," she said. He took the cup with both hands, his fingers brushing hers briefly, and murmured a soft thank you. There was an awkward silence for a moment, filled only by the gentle crackling of the fire and the soft hum of the Christmas lights. "I didn't know where else to go," he said finally, breaking the quiet. "I was trying to find a safe place to stay tonight. The streets are really cold, and I didn't want to end up outside all night." His voice trembled slightly, not from anger or fear, but from exhaustion and the deep chill he had endured. Clara listened, feeling a mix of empathy and sadness. She knew the pain of loneliness and isolation all too well. "You don't have to explain," she said softly. "You're safe here. Just rest for a while." She gestured toward the sofa, and he moved there, curling slightly under the blanket. The sight of him, so fragile and vulnerable, stirred something in her heart that she had not felt in a long time. For the first time this evening, she realized that her apartment, her small, solitary world, had the power to provide warmth and comfort, not just for herself, but for someone else. She decided to make a little snack for him, something simple yet nourishing. She went to the kitchen humming softly and brought back a plate with slices of bread, cheese, and some fruit. The young man smiled faintly as he took a piece, and Clara felt a small flicker of joy. There was something profoundly human about sharing food, about offering warmth and kindness without expecting anything in return. She noticed how the tension in his shoulders eased, how the color returned to his cheeks, and she realized that even small gestures could make a significant difference. They began to talk, slowly at first, carefully. The young man, whose name was Daniel, told her about his life, about being far from family, trying to make ends meet, and spending weeks in temporary shelters before he had decided to try the streets on his own for a night. He spoke quietly, avoiding unnecessary details, but Clara could sense the weight of his experiences. She listened intently, offering nods and soft words of encouragement, never interrupting. For the first time that evening, she felt truly connected to another human being, sharing a moment that was both fragile and deeply meaningful. As the night wore on, the conversation became lighter. They spoke about simple things, favorite movies, books, music, and even the little joys of winter, like the way snow sparkled in the streetlights, or how warm scarves could make even the coldest days bearable. Clara found herself laughing softly at some of his stories, a sound she had not made freely in years. Daniel's presence was comforting, a reminder that even strangers could bring light into the darkest of nights. Clara noticed the time only when the clock chimed softly, signaling that midnight was approaching. The young man looked at her, a small smile on his face. "I didn't think anyone would let me in tonight. Thank you for everything." Clara felt a lump in her throat. She realized that she too had received more than she had given. In offering refuge, she had discovered warmth, laughter, and connection, things she had almost forgotten existed in her life. For a while, they sat together in quiet companionship, watching the flames flicker and listening to the soft hum of the holiday lights. Clara felt a sense of peace settle over her, a feeling she had longed for all evening. She realized that while the holiday had begun with solitude, it had grown into something unexpected, a shared moment of human kindness and understanding. She had opened her door to a stranger, and in doing so, had opened her heart to the possibility of connection once again. Finally, as the young man began to doze under the blanket, Clara stood and gently covered him with a heavier quilt she had kept for herself. She returned to her chair by the fire, her heart full and her mind quiet. The apartment no longer felt empty. It had been transformed by the simple presence of another person. She sipped her tea, watching the firelight dance across the walls, and realized that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could create the most profound warmth. Clara thought about the night outside, the snow-covered streets, and how easily someone could be lost in the cold if no one reached out. She silently promised herself that she would not forget this feeling, that she would remain open to the unexpected moments that life offered. She had begun the evening alone, with a quiet ache in her heart, but she would end it with a renewed sense of hope. And in that quiet, snow-filled night, Clara realized something she hadn't allowed herself to believe in years. Even when life seemed lonely and cold, kindness could arrive like a gentle knock at the door, changing everything in the simplest, most human way. The fire crackled gently, casting a warm glow across Clara's living room, as Daniel settled more comfortably under the thick quilt she had draped over him. He had dozed for a short while, but now his eyes opened slowly, meeting Clara's. There was a quiet gratitude in his gaze, a softness that made her heart feel lighter. For the first time that evening, Clara noticed a change within herself. She no longer felt the familiar weight of loneliness pressing down. Instead, there was a small, growing sense of connection, like a spark of light flickering steadily in the darkness. I feel a little better now," Daniel said quietly, rubbing his hands together as if to warm them further. "I didn't realize how cold I had been until I got in here." His voice was gentle, tired, but carrying a hint of relief. Clara smiled softly, feeling a strange sense of pride. It was a simple act, offering warmth, tea, and a place to rest, but it had already made a real difference in someone's life. "You're safe here," Clara said, trying to keep her voice calm despite the fluttering in her chest. "You don't have to worry about anything tonight. Just rest, eat, and stay warm." Daniel nodded, taking another sip of the tea she had poured earlier. The warmth of the liquid seemed to seep through him, easing not only the chill of the cold night but the exhaustion of a long, lonely journey. Clara watched him quietly, noticing the way he relaxed, allowing himself to be vulnerable in a space that had once been her own sanctuary. After a few moments, Clara decided to offer something more. "Do you want to eat something? I have some bread, cheese, and fruit. It's simple, but it will give you energy." Daniel's eyes lit up, a faint smile spreading across his face. I'd like that." "Thank you." She brought the plate over and set it carefully on the small table in front of him. He reached for a slice of bread, his hand slightly trembling, and Clara felt a wave of emotion. She realized that this small act of sharing had opened a door between them, one that neither of them had expected. As Daniel ate, Clara asked gentle questions about his life, keeping her tone light but attentive. He spoke quietly, carefully choosing his words, as if he had grown used to keeping his experiences to himself. He told her about his family, who lived far away in another city, and how circumstances had kept him from being with them during the holidays. He spoke about his work, the challenges he faced, and the nights he had spent trying to find shelter. Clara listened closely, nodding, offering small words of comfort. She did not interrupt, did not judge. She simply let him share his story, giving him the space to be heard. The more Daniel spoke, the more Clara noticed how similar they were in some ways. Both had experienced periods of solitude, times when life had felt heavy and the world distant. Both had relied on small comforts, the warmth of a home, the familiarity of simple routines, the quiet joy of small, personal traditions. Sharing these stories created a bridge between them, a connection born not of familiarity but of mutual understanding and empathy. Clara felt a growing warmth in her chest, one that had little to do with the fire. As the night continued, they began to share lighter stories. Daniel spoke of his favorite books and movies, of moments of humor he had found even in difficult circumstances. Clara laughed softly at some of his tales, surprised at how easily the laughter came. It was a sound she had not made freely in years, and the realization that someone else's presence could bring it out of her was both comforting and surprising. They spoke of the small joys of life, the way sunlight reflected on snow, the comforting smell of freshly baked bread, the delight of a quiet evening spent with a warm blanket and a good story. Clara felt a sense of renewal as they talked. The loneliness that had weighed on her earlier in the evening seemed distant now, replaced by a feeling of shared humanity. She realized that connection did not always come in grand gestures or long relationships. Sometimes it appeared quietly in moments of trust and openness. She watched Daniel, noticing the way his shoulders had relaxed, the way his eyes brightened when he spoke of things he loved, and she understood that she too was changing. The act of giving had become an act of receiving, filling her heart in ways she had not expected. The hours passed quietly, marked only by the soft ticking of the clock and the steady glow of the fire. Daniel asked about Clara's own life, curious about her traditions, her memories of Christmases past. She spoke of simpler times, family gatherings, baking cookies with her siblings, decorating the tree with ornaments that had been passed down through generations. After, she shared stories of laughter, small mishaps, and moments of quiet joy. As she spoke, Daniel listened intently, his expression one of genuine interest and respect. Clara realized that in sharing these memories, she was opening herself up in a way she had not done in years. By now, the fire had burned low, the room filled with a soft golden light. Clara stood and moved to the small kitchen once more. She returned with a small dessert she had prepared earlier, a simple slice of cake. She offered it to Daniel, who accepted with a shy smile. "You've done too much for me already," he said softly. Clara shook her head. "Not too much. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're safe." The words felt natural, genuine, and unforced. There was no expectation, no obligation, just the simple truth of two people finding comfort in each other's presence. After they had eaten, Daniel leaned back in his chair, looking more relaxed than when he had arrived. He spoke quietly about the cold streets, about how lonely nights had become a habit he could not easily break. Clara listened, offering small reassurances. "It's okay to be alone sometimes," she said softly, "but you don't always have to be. There are people who care. There are moments when kindness appears, even when you least expect it." He nodded, as if absorbing her words carefully, considering them in the quiet of the room. The conversation drifted to dreams and hopes, things they had both wanted in life, but had sometimes felt out of reach. Daniel spoke of his desire to travel, to see places he had only read about, to meet new people and experience the world beyond his current struggles. Clara shared her own hopes, simple desires for peace, for connection, for moments of happiness that did not require grand gestures but simply the presence of those who mattered. The room was quiet but full, the silence not empty but brimming with shared understanding. As midnight approached, the first gentle sounds of Christmas carols drifted from a nearby radio. Clara and Daniel paused to listen, letting the soft melodies fill the space between them. The music seemed to carry with it a sense of calm, a gentle reminder of the holiday outside her door. Clara felt her heart swell with gratitude, realizing that this unexpected encounter had changed the course of her evening, and perhaps even her life. She had begun the night alone, uncertain and quiet, but now she felt a warmth that went far beyond the fire's glow. Daniel looked around the room, noticing the lights on the tree, the decorations, the fire, and the small, personal touches that made the apartment feel like a home. He smiled softly, a mixture of relief and appreciation in his eyes. I never expected this, he said quietly. I didn't think anyone would care enough to let me in. Clara felt a lump in her throat, touched by the honesty and vulnerability in his words. She simply nodded, letting the fire and the quiet night speak for her. In that moment, they both understood something profound. Life could be unpredictable, often lonely, but small acts of kindness could change everything. The simple offering of warmth, food, and companionship had created a bond, fragile yet meaningful. Clara realized that she had given more than shelter. She had given hope, and in return she had received the joy of connection, the laughter of shared stories, and the quiet satisfaction of making a difference in someone's life. As the night deepened, they continued to talk softly, their words flowing naturally, unhurried and genuine. The fire burned lower, but the room was bright with human warmth. Clara looked at Daniel and felt a sense of peace she had not known for a long time. She understood that life, even in its quiet moments, could surprise her. A stranger's arrival had transformed her Christmas Eve from one of solitude into one of meaningful connection. Finally, as Daniel's eyes began to droop, the exhaustion of the cold and the long day catching up with him, Clara helped him settle more comfortably on the sofa. She tucked the blanket around him and sat back in her chair, sipping her tea and watching the firelight dance across the walls. She felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, a calm understanding that sometimes life's most important moments came when they were least expected. For Clara, this Christmas Eve would no longer be remembered as a night of loneliness. Instead, it would be a night of kindness, connection, and the gentle discovery that opening one's heart to another could bring warmth beyond measure. She had welcomed a stranger in from the cold, and in doing so had rediscovered a spark of hope and joy she thought she had lost forever. The hours passed quietly, but in that calm, Clara felt an energy she had not experienced in years. The fire flickered low, and the soft glow of Christmas lights reflected gently across the room. Daniel had grown more relaxed, leaning back on the sofa and even smiling occasionally as they shared stories. Clara noticed small details, the way he wriggled his toes to warm them, the way his eyes followed the flames, the faint line of fatigue in his face that gradually softened. It was a quiet night, yet for both of them it felt full of meaning. At one point, Clara stood and walked to the kitchen to fetch a small plate of cookies she had baked earlier in the day. The aroma of vanilla and chocolate filled the air as she placed the plate on the coffee table between them. "I made these earlier," she said softly. "Help yourself." Daniel looked at the cookies with wide eyes, then smiled sheepishly. "I haven't had something like this in a while," he admitted, taking a small bite. The warmth of the cookie and the kindness behind it seemed to lift a burden he had carried, even if only for a few moments. Clara returned to her chair, settling once more by the fire. She noticed the way Daniel's eyes lingered on the glow of the flames, and she felt an unexpected sense of calm. It was rare to feel this comfortable with someone she had just met, yet there was a quiet honesty in his presence, an authenticity that made her let go of the invisible walls she had built around herself over the years. Clara allowed herself to believe that perhaps, even in a world that sometimes felt cold distant, moments of true connection were possible. "Do you celebrate Christmas with your family?" Clara asked gently, breaking the silence. Daniel shook his head. "Not really," he admitted. "My family lives far away, and I've been on my own for some time. Holidays, they're always a little lonely for me." Clara's heart ached at his words. She knew the feeling all too well, the quiet emptiness of a holiday spent without loved ones. She reached out instinctively, placing a hand over his briefly. "Then maybe tonight can be a different kind of Christmas," she said softly. "One where you're not alone, even if it's just for a little while." Daniel looked at her, and a faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips. He nodded, as if absorbing her words with a careful hopefulness. "I'd like that," he whispered. There was a pause as the words hung in the air, gentle and meaningful. It was a small moment, yet it carried weight. A recognition that two strangers, meeting by chance, had found a shared warmth neither expected. The fire crackled, and the room seemed to shrink, cocooning them in a sense of intimacy and quiet joy. As the night deepened, Clara suggested they play a simple game. She retrieved a deck of cards from a drawer and set them on the coffee table. At first, Daniel hesitated, unsure if he should join, but Clara's warm encouragement made him smile and agree. They played quietly, laughing softly at mistakes, celebrating small victories, and sharing stories that had nothing to do with hardship. It was a light-hearted activity, but it carried an undercurrent of connection, the kind that comes from sharing time, space, and attention with another human being. After the game, they sat back, tired but content. Clara noticed the way Daniel's shoulders had relaxed completely now, the tension of the cold streets and loneliness slowly melting away. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment as she realized how much these small, simple moments mattered. Life could be harsh, she thought, but it also held surprises, moments where strangers became companions, where kindness created warmth beyond the physical, touching the heart in ways that words could not always describe. Daniel began to speak softly about his childhood, about the memories he carried from home. He described small joys, the smell of cookies baking in his grandmother's kitchen, the sound of carols sung by neighbors, the laughter of siblings chasing each other in the snow. Clara listened intently, imagining each scene as he described it, feeling a gentle echo of her own memories. It was strange, she realized, how two lives could feel so separate and yet connect through shared experiences of hope, loneliness, and simple happiness. As the night went on, Daniel's voice grew quieter, more reflective. He admitted that he had spent many Christmases feeling invisible, overlooked, or unimportant. Clara's heart ached for him, but she also felt a sense of pride in the simple truth that he had knocked on her door, seeking refuge, and in doing so had allowed them both to discover a new kind of joy. "You are not invisible," she said softly. "You are here, now, and you matter. Tonight, at least, you are not alone." Daniel's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and he nodded silently, moved by her words. The fire had burned low, leaving behind glowing embers that cast a gentle light across the room. Clara poured herself another cup of tea, and Daniel accepted one as well. They sipped quietly, watching the flames and listening to the soft hum of the holiday lights. There was a sense of peace in the room, a feeling that neither had expected when the evening began. It was more than warmth from a fire. It was a connection, a mutual recognition of vulnerability, hope, and the quiet comfort of being understood. At one point, Daniel spoke again, his voice small but sincere. "I don't know why I came here tonight," he admitted. "I guess I was just looking for a place to feel safe. But being here, it's more than that. It feels like I found something I didn't know I was missing." Clara nodded, understanding perfectly. She, too, had spent so many years alone, guarding herself against the world, unaware that opening her door could lead to such a profound sense of warmth. The clock chimed softly, signaling that it was very late, but neither of them felt the urge to move. The night had stretched into something quiet and intimate, a space where time seemed to slow and the world outside disappeared. Clara realized that this night, so ordinary in some ways, would remain extraordinary in her memory. It was a night defined not by grand gestures, but by the quiet power of human kindness, shared presence, and the courage to let someone in, even when the world outside was cold and unforgiving. Eventually, Daniel shifted slightly, stretching under the blanket. "I should probably try to rest more properly," he said quietly, though there was no rush in his tone. Clara helped him adjust the blanket and ensured he was comfortable on the sofa. She returned to her chair, feeling a quiet satisfaction in having provided comfort and safety. She realized that the simple act of offering shelter, warmth, and understanding had created a ripple that extended far beyond her initial intentions. The night wore on, and outside, the snow continued to fall softly, blanketing the world in quiet white. Inside, the fire had burned low, leaving behind glowing embers that mirrored the warmth in their hearts. Clara and Daniel sat in companionable silence, the room filled with a gentle glow and the unspoken understanding that this night had changed them both. It was a night of trust, of shared vulnerability, and of quiet joy. Finally, as Daniel drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep, Clara watched him for a moment, feeling a mixture of relief, happiness, and awe. She realized that sometimes life's most meaningful moments came not from grand plans or expectations, but from the unexpected gestures that connected one human heart to another. She had opened her door to a stranger, and in doing so, had opened her heart to a new kind of hope. Clara sat quietly, sipping her tea and reflecting on the night. She thought about the moments of laughter, the shared stories, the small gestures of care, and the quiet trust that had grown between them. She understood that Christmas for her would no longer be about solitude or longing. It would be about the possibility of connection, the warmth of kindness, and the unexpected joys that could arrive when least expected. And in that quiet, gentle night, Clara felt a truth that would stay with her forever, that even in the coldest, loneliest moments, A single act of compassion could spark warmth, create bonds, and remind two hearts that they were not alone. Morning light spilled softly through Clara's window, brushing the edges of the small living room with a pale golden glow. The snow outside had stopped falling, leaving the world covered in a quiet, sparkling blanket of white. Clara stirred slowly, the warmth of the fire having long faded into glowing embers. She glanced around, noticing that Daniel was still asleep on the sofa, wrapped comfortably in the blanket she had tucked around him the night before. He looked peaceful. The tension from the cold streets and lonely nights finally lifted. Clara's chest swelled with a quiet happiness. For a long moment she simply watched him, allowing herself to absorb the extraordinary feeling of the night. Something had shifted inside her. A connection had formed, one that neither time nor distance could erase. She remembered the knocking at her door, the soft voice asking for refuge, and the hesitation she had felt before opening it. That moment had seemed small at the time, but now she understood how life could change in an instant when kindness and courage met. Clara moved quietly to the kitchen and put on a kettle for tea. The familiar sounds, the whistle of the kettle, the clinking of cups, felt comforting in a new way, as if they were part of a story unfolding. She poured 2 cups and carried them to the table near the window. The snow outside glittered in the morning light, reflecting a calm beauty that contrasted with the chill of the night before. Clara set 1 cup down near Daniel and sipped from her own, feeling a quiet sense of fulfillment. When Daniel stirred, his eyes opening slowly, he blinked against the sunlight streaming in through the window. "Good morning," he said softly, his voice carrying a warmth that made Clara smile. "Morning," she replied. For a few moments they sat quietly, sipping tea, letting the morning settle around them. The room was peaceful, filled with the gentle sounds of life continuing quietly outside, yet inside it was warm, calm, and safe. "Thank you," Daniel said finally, his voice small but sincere. "Last night, I can't explain how much it meant to me. You didn't have to let me in, but you did." And now, Clara's heart ached with emotion. She had known that offering help would bring warmth, but she hadn't realized just how much it could impact both of them. "You don't need to thank me," she said softly. "I'm glad you came. I'm glad I could help, and I think I needed this too, more than I realized." They talked quietly over breakfast, a simple meal of toast, fruit, and leftover cookies from the night before. The conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter, gentle teasing, and thoughtful reflection. Daniel shared his plans for the coming days, how he intended to find work, reconnect with his family over the phone, and continue his journey with a renewed sense of purpose. Clara listened, offering advice when asked and sharing encouragement where she could. The morning sunlight seemed to illuminate more than just the room. It highlighted a sense of possibility that neither of them had expected. After breakfast, Clara suggested they take a short walk outside. The snow sparkled under the winter sun, and the streets were quiet, almost magical in the early morning. Daniel slipped on his coat, and Clara handed him a scarf and gloves. Together they stepped outside into the crisp air. The cold was sharp, but it was invigorating, carrying with it a sense of new beginnings. As they walked side by side, they talked about simple things: the beauty of the snow, the sound of footsteps crunching on the ice, the joy of small traditions that made life feel alive. Clara realized that this moment, walking alongside someone she had just met, sharing conversation, laughter, and warmth, was as powerful as any grand celebration she had known in the past. The streets were still quiet, and the world felt vast and peaceful. Daniel smiled at her, a quiet understanding passing between them, and she felt the same spark of connection she had felt the night before. It was a reminder that life could be full of surprises, and that meaningful bonds could form even in the most unexpected circumstances. When they returned to her apartment, the fire had long since cooled, leaving only the faint scent of wood smoke and warmth lingering in the room. Clara made another pot of tea, and they settled back into their chairs, comfortable in each other's presence. Daniel spoke about the lessons he had learned from being alone, about the importance of seeking kindness and being open to it when it appeared. She listened, reflecting on her own journey, and realized that their meeting had not only warmed the night, but had also transformed her perspective on connection, generosity, and the quiet miracles of everyday life. As the day unfolded, they shared small tasks together, tidying up the apartment, arranging the remaining cookies in a small dish for later, and even hanging a few more ornaments on the tree. The activities were simple, almost mundane, but they carried a sense of joy and companionship that neither of them had anticipated. Clara felt a growing sense of gratitude for the unexpected events that had brought Daniel into her life. The apartment, once quiet and solitary, now felt vibrant and alive, filled with laughter, conversation, and shared purpose. By afternoon, Daniel prepared to leave. He had received a message from his family, reassuring him that they were safe and thinking of him, and he felt ready to face the day with renewed energy. Clara walked him to the door, her hands lingering on the edges of the blanket she had given him, a reminder of the comfort and warmth that had passed between them. "Thank you, Clara," he said, his voice sincere and full of emotion. "I'll never forget this night or your kindness. You've made a difference in my life, and I hope someday I can do the same for someone else." Clara nodded, feeling tears well in her eyes. "You already have," she whispered. "Just by being here, you've reminded me that life can surprise us in the best ways, and you've reminded me that connection is always possible, even when we least expect it." Daniel smiled softly, gave her a small, heartfelt wave, and stepped out into the sunlight. Clara watched him go, feeling a mixture of happiness and wistfulness. The world outside seemed brighter somehow, filled with possibility and promise. After he left, Clara returned to her chair by the fire, now only embers glowing faintly in the hearth. She wrapped herself in a blanket and reflected on the night and morning that had passed. The experience had transformed more than just her evening. It had changed something deep within her. She realized that kindness, no matter how small, could ripple through life in ways she had never imagined. A single act of compassion could create warmth, connection, and hope where there had once been solitude and quiet longing. Clara thought about the future, about the possibility of new friendships, of reaching out to others, and of allowing herself to be open to unexpected moments. She knew that life could be unpredictable, but she also understood that it was in these unpredictable moments that the most meaningful experiences often occurred. Daniel's visit had reminded her that even in her quiet, solitary life there was room for joy, laughter, and companionship. She glanced at the Christmas tree, now fully illuminated by the morning sunlight, and felt a sense of peace she had not known in years. The ornaments sparkled gently, reflecting not just light but the memory of the previous night, of shared stories, gentle laughter, and the quiet bond that had formed between her and a stranger who had become, for a moment, a companion. Clara realized that this Christmas, though different from any she had known, was perhaps the most memorable and meaningful of all. As the day went on, Clara continued with her routines, but everything felt slightly different. The house no longer felt empty. It was alive with the echoes of connection. She found herself humming softly, smiling at small details she might once have overlooked, the way sunlight hit the snow outside, the gentle flicker of the embers, the warmth of a cup of tea. Life had not changed in grand ways, but it had shifted in the quietest and most profound ways possible. That evening, Clara sat again by the fire, this time alone, but not lonely. She held her cup of tea, the warmth comforting her as she thought about Daniel and the night they had shared. She realized that the true gift of the holidays was not in presents or decorations, but in connection, compassion, and the courage to open one's heart to the unexpected. She felt a sense of gratitude that ran deep, knowing that this experience had left her life forever changed. As the night drew near, Clara whispered a quiet wish to herself, a hope that she and Daniel, along with others they would meet in life, could continue to find warmth, kindness, and meaningful connection. She leaned back, letting the firelight dance across the room, feeling a calm satisfaction in her heart. Life was full of surprises, she knew, and sometimes the smallest gestures could create the biggest impact. Tonight she had learned that a stranger's presence could illuminate even the darkest moments, and that kindness, in its simplest form, could transform lives in ways one might never expect. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply, allowing the peace of the evening to settle over her. The world outside was quiet, blanketed in snow and stillness, yet inside her heart was warm, full of hope, and alive with the memory of an extraordinary night. She understood now, more than ever, that life's beauty often lay in unexpected encounters, gentle acts of kindness, and the courage to open one's heart. And so, Clara spent Christmas not just by the fire, but in the quiet knowledge that she was part of something larger, a world where even a single moment of compassion could create warmth that lasted far beyond the night. The memory of Daniel's visit, the shared laughter, and the trust they had built remained with her, a reminder that connection and hope could appear even when life seemed quiet and lonely. That Christmas, she realized, would never truly be spent alone.